Living in Australia, she values her Irish heritage and identity immensely. Maeve, she's a bit embarrassed about this, she's a bit shy. Recently, she won an award for her outstanding performance and lasting contribution to the Irish programme on Melbourne Ethnic Community Radio. She's going to give us a short presentation on the significance of the forgotten Williams Lane, where the GPO Cumann nursing contingent were trapped on the eve of the surrender, while ferrying the wounded volunteers to Jervis Street Hospital. Give Maeve a warm welcome.
So I'm going to give a short presentation, so Noreen speed me up when I have a lot to get through, because Williams Lane's story, there's a whole bigger story around it, and it's to do with the evacuation of the women from the GPO, particularly the nursing contingent. I have been dying to tell this story for probably 2 or 3 years. I've written to the GPO, I've gone in, and they're not interested. So yesterday I took my computer in and I just went out to the coffee shop to be in the environment, and I finished off some slides. So I'm not a historian, I'm not an academic, I'm just a proud and passionate 1916 relative and fiercely proud Irish woman, and I'm an emigrant, so I represent the diaspora, and we do care about our history, and make no mistake about that. Just because we're not living here for whatever reasons, mine, I married an Australian, we care very, very much. So this is, I'm just going to set it up on my computer here too, because I've got the presenter notes and I'm not too proficient to talk without that. So while I do that, does everybody know where Williams Lane is? No?
Yes, well,
I think we do, but sure.
Okay, well, you'll be amazed to find out that it's within yards of the GPO. So it's beside, it's on Princess Street, and it's a shortcut that you might take if you were going to Middle Abbey Street.
The way the sheep's around the temple.
Sorry, thanks for waiting. So who am I and why am I before you? Because Noreen invited me and Brian, and as I said, I've been dying to tell this story. I'm going to try and be quick, so let me know if I'm going to go. So I'm the granddaughter of 2 1916 volunteers, Lucy Agnes-Smith, who was of Palmerston Place in 1916. If anybody knows where that is, please tell me. And Tom Byrne, poor Tom. And the remarkable thing for me is their daughter, their only surviving daughter, Sheila, my mum, is still alive and still with us, and she's 96 years old.
Wow.
So hello to any other first generation relatives here too. I think Jimmy Rennes, and Jimmy's written a marvellous book that I've used in my research, and Mary's work. I've used a lot of other people's research, so, and Marcus as well. There's a lot of people here who've done a lot, so I mightn't have named them because I'm not very good at putting references. I'm not a published author or anything, but I want to acknowledge the people that have helped me along the way. That's a picture of my mum outside the GPO in 2016 because she was staying alive for that day. And that's all she wanted, was to see her mother in particular recognised. And she felt that she didn't know the story because her mother hadn't talked about it. And she wanted the women recognised. And she said, Maeve, that's all I'm staying alive for. And she's still here with us a few years later. She had such a good day. So it all really started around the Common Among commemoration that Mary was talking about in 2014. I didn't know much about my grandmother, but we knew that she had served in the GPO and that she'd attended the wound of James Connolly. Now, my mum didn't get invited to that ceremony until somebody in Australia contacted me, who was Eamon Murphy, and said, oh, there's a commemoration on in Ireland, is your mum going? Mum didn't know anything about it, but within 24 hours everything was done, and my mum had an invitation and she arrived and she's there with her carers, not with any family member, and the President came over and acknowledged her. She met Mary there, and with her she brought a little cup that Jenny Wise Power had given her, because apparently my mother is the goddaughter of either Jenny Wise Power or Cookie Nancy. We really don't know, but we have this beautiful little silver cup. So, Common Among being the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of formation, and Mary will know more about this photo, but this is where the women got together, and there's some of the people that are there, some very clear photograph: Jenny Wise Power, Madam Markovich, Mrs. Tom Clark's there, Mrs. Plunkett, Mrs. Conley, and what they were trying to do, as we know, is advance the cause of Irish liberty by any means present. So why am I here? So these are the women. This is a very famous photograph. Have all of them been identified, Mary?
Yeah.
In 2016, there was a couple that weren't identified, and someone was asking earlier, do we know? So this photograph was taken, I think, in the summer of 1916. So there's, this is not all of them, this is some of the women. My grandmother is in that photo. So I was intrigued and I wanted to know more about her. In Australia, for the commemoration, they got wind that I was the granddaughter of a woman from Cumann, and they wanted to know about the 1960 women. So I gave a talk out there, and people you wouldn't believe it, but people out in Australia of Irish heritage really want to know these stories. So I was delighted to be able to give that talk. Now, when I was there, it was attended by Margaret Keogh's grandniece. Now, Margaret Keogh was killed in duty. She was a nurse, I think, at the Dublin Union, and she is acknowledged as being the first casualty, and she wasn't in Common Among, but she was a trained nurse working there in 1916. So that was quite remarkable to have her grandniece at my talk in Melbourne. I read a lot about the nurses and the midwives, and I take my hats off to them, whether they're in Common Among or not, and there's a lot been written, and this is one of the other sources that I used to get the atmosphere of what was happening around the time. Okay, back to Williams Lane. Now, I have to acknowledge the Come Here To Me blog on this. I think Donald Fallon's involved in this, where there was a discussion going on about where is this lane, why is it called Williams Lane, who cares anyway? So we went back and they found a very old map of Dublin, and it's John Rock's map of Dublin 1756, and somebody tells me that Williams Lane is actually on that map. I can't see it. I tried to blow it up, and I came up with this. So we've got Abbey Street, and we've got Drogheda Street, which was before Sackville Street, which was before Conley Street, and I have to see my little arrow. Well, I think that's where it is, but you can go online and look for this. So then we had, it was visible in 1863. You can see there's no name on it, but it's there. And then suddenly disappears. Where did it go in 1885? Then still missing in 1913, and according to Google Maps, in 2011 there's no Williams Lane. So it's a bit of a mystery, isn't it? So I looked it up on Google Maps last week, and there's another Williams Lane in Dublin. Does anyone know where that one is? Clanbrassil Street. Yeah. So it wasn't, so they did put in a William's name, but it wasn't the one I was looking for. So I can tell you William's name exists. Because there's my home. And Lana MacLean. Now, someone might know in Irish whether that gives a hint as to why it's called William's Lane.
No, they just said it's bad translation.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a lake on Moore Street Road.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering if anyone does know. So I brought my mom to the laneway because this is my grandmother's obituary. And just tying in what Mary was saying about how it speaks about Lucy, and she lived to the ripe old age of 90, member of Cumann. She served in the General Post Office, and she tended the wounded James Connolly. And then it talks about my grandfather. So half her obituary is all about my granddad. Now, he was a remarkable man, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about him today. This is about Lucy. So it was very much survived by the three daughters, Mrs. E. Gamer and Mrs. So very much that was the way things were. So when we went to the laneway, I told Mum this is where some people might remember when they think that James Connolly was wounded. Do people know that James Connolly was wounded in William's Lane? And it's from the other side, Middle Abbey. It's a great shortcut. And,
I was in.
did you? Oh, lots of synergy today. So I don't know whether you'd walk down there dark at night. I just don't know.
It's a bit smelly.
Okay, so it's not being very well looked after, so we want to give it a bit of love. And this is the purpose of my talk, is to bring this lane onto the radar. So it was in the military archives are a fantastic source, and I recommend everyone don't buy a novel, go into the archives and read the women's stories. They're better than any thriller, and they're real life, and they're just fascinating. So this one is I took out bits and pieces, and I haven't always put the names because my excuse is a lot of my work is back in Australia, and as Mary probably, you've got loads and loads of research. So this is how it was described in one of the witness statements. I noticed the uncensored 15 in William's Lane. So it was an outpost. He was carefully watching the approaches from Abbey Street. I was very much impressed by the courage with which he stuck to his post all by himself, despite his nervous tension. I walked along Abbey Street from Haven Street and to see how near I could get to O'Connell Street with safety. And I got as far as William's Lane. William's Lane is the last thoroughfare only for pedestrians, leading from Abbey Street to Prince Street, and middle of Abbey Street at that time was deserted. So I was just I put this map in because it shows some of the buildings that were around William's Lane. For example, Easton's was still there. Has your eyesight? We have the Hotel Metropole. We have the Freeman's Journal, which was one of the biggest papers at the time. And then on the other side, GPO and the Coliseum Theatre that comes into the story, and then Bewley's, there must have been a Bewley's there as well, on the other side of Princess Street. So we've all placed ourselves now, we know where we are, and you're all going to run down and go down through the William's Lane after the talk. So it is famous for the fact that, well, if it does have some infamy, it's because James Connolly was shot. So this is again from the statement. And on Wednesday, sniping began from the GPO towards O'Leary Street, Parnell Street and Aon Street. The shooting was directed against enemy snipers. The first sound of shell fire was heard, but none of the shells fell near the GPO. So on Thursday, James Connolly was wounded while in Abbey Street, or William's Lane, arranging to send men to some post in Liffey Street. I actually think he was arranging to send my grandfather to Liffey Street, but that's another story. I went out and found him in William's Lane, and with the aid of 4 men, carried him into the GPO, where Jim Ryan treated him, and another synergy. So we've got sisters there, so the brothers fought with their sisters. After a short rest, he insisted on being brought up to the men in the front of the GPO to cheer them up. I went up there with him, and that's witness statement too. And I can't read that from here, but Okay. So this is a very famous picture again, and it's depicting James Connolly on a stretcher. So there's no marker or plaque or anything at the moment in Williams Lane to indicate its importance. So it was a strategic location, definitely. Here's another account where it says that on his way back from the GPO, James Connolly received a very serious leg wound, and he was effectively ordered to come back. So from Abbey Street, he succeeded in dragging himself through Williams Lane, where he was sent out at the end of a fire as far as Princess Street, and he was brought back in a stretcher. So we have James Connolly dragging himself through Williams Lane, and then the men coming out and bringing him back in on a stretcher. So when he's on the stretcher, I got this from a newspaper article, and they spelled it's Julie Brennan's name is spelled correctly there, and G-R-E-N. So he talked to Winifred and Julia, I think, Elizabeth and Julie Brennan, and he said to them, when I was lying in the lane, I thought of how often you two have been up and down there, nothing ever happened to you. So James Connolly said, nothing ever happened to you, Gertrude, when you were running around after that. So the women took great risks out in the battlefield during 1960, and we know this because of the BMH accounts. I went through a lot of the women's, and I wrote up what was to be something that I was to publish, and then I have two teenagers and twin, and I just never got round. But I wrote up half the story, and it's on the Kilmaine and Tales website, and this was the part that dealt with the women, that my grandmother was part of this group of about 12 another Stately Ferry women in the GPO who were evacuated, not to Moore Street, but they were evacuated with the wounded to Jervis Street. Now there were 2 evacuations of the women to Jervis Street. This is what I've come up with in reading the files. And Mary, I feel kind of that you're there and you know a lot more than me, but this is what I've come up with. So I'm not going to go, this story's been written up, so I sort of put it in slide a bit. I thought this was interesting about what type of women they were. And I went back to Dermot O'Donoghue and Ross's souvenir at his funeral, where we all know they used that as propaganda to recruit people. And I found this very interesting when they say, in the ranks of coming along, there's a place for every patriarch, Irish woman, and plenty of good work to be done. It is not by any means necessary that a girl or woman should be of Amazonian character to join the organisation, as there is full scope for the gentlest and for the most warlike activities. So a great number of the members, some of the branches, a great number of members of some of the have taken out certificates in nursing and first aid work, which will undoubtedly prove useful, even if their possessors never hear a shot fired. That was the proof of them. The organisation should certainly appeal to all patriotic Irish women who would like to do something else besides standing idly by while the great destiny of their native land is being decided. It's only by taking part in such good work that the dream for which O'Donoghue Rossa and his Confederates suffered in English prisons can be brought to its full realisation. So there was full scope for everybody there, for the gentleness and for the most warlike citizens. And that was the recruit. That was the call to arms for the women. So Mary used this quote as well. The next quote: "They did what they knew." I just took the end, but they did what they did what came to their hands to do day to day, whatever they were capable of, by aptitude or by training, and they certainly did. So that we attribute that quote to Dr. Lena Maloney. And then we know in the recruitment, some of what they were first aid and ambulance classes for trainers of drill signalling and rifle practice. And I have today, Deirdre's got it there. I've got my grandmother's original Cumann certificate, and that's signed by Sean Doyle and Kathleen Clark, Donald Crowley and Liz Ryan and Leslie Price. So that's in Irish, and Micheál O'Leary translated that for me. So that's my grandmother. So you're more than, I brought a few memorabilia here today, so you're more than welcome to come up and see them. Okay, so there they are, drilling. I've just taken images to paint the picture, and that is probably like Winifred's Webley revolver. I don't know, we know she came to the GPO with a typewriter and a revolver, but Con Colbert actually gave my grandmother a gun, and it was in the National Museum, and my mum remembers going to visit it, but we can't find it now. But they were armed, and she used to have the revolver. My mum told me, and the wonderful thing is I can always go back to my mum and say, is that true? And my mum's got her full wits about her, and she said yes. She would sit on a stool waiting for a raid, and she would have the gun under her long skirt ready to fire. But this has been with like a little baby in the cradle as well, and my grandfather, because they were being watched by the DMP. But probably only actually my grandfather was being watched, because the DMP weren't really watching the women. Some of them maybe, Jenny Wise-Parr or Countess Markovich, but they weren't. So this is just another painting depiction in the GPO. The priest is probably giving the last rites, or so the women were doing. They were standing in for the men at the windows. They were not just nursing, and of course there was the women in there with the food and in the GPO. So I went back to a lot of first-hand accounts, and that's one that appeared in the New York Times. Moira Regan, and she goes into detail about inside the GPO. And this was particularly, Molly Reynolds wrote this 10 years afterwards. But this was the start of me becoming, this is what happened to my grandmother. She did more than accompany, she did more than tend to the wounded James Conn. This was a fantastic account, and it got me really, so their work was hard and heavy, and sleep and rest impossible in the GPO, food irregular and often insufficient. They tended the wounded, they carried dispatches, arms and ammunition night and day, through showers of shrapnel, picking their way through broken walls and burning houses, caring less for their own safety, and making sure they delivered the wounded to Jervis Street. So then I went back to my grandmother's statement, and she was very modest in what she said. When she was trying to get her pension, which was a very rigorous process, we know, not all of the women applied for it. Her application was 160 pages. It was between two documents. She applied for it in 1935 and received it in 1938. When she did get it, she was underpaid. She needed so many references and verifications what she did. But sometimes I think to her, well, they didn't give her very much space to write what she did, and she just said, she was asked for particulars of any military operations or engagements or services rendered during Easter week, and she answered that she'd come back from the Hibernian Bank, so she was going over Saxwell Street. But then when questioned about coming back to the GPO, she just simply said, I then remained until the surrender when I went with other members of the nursing staff to Jervis Street Hospital. So I was confused because I knew the surrender was on Saturday and she was talking about the surrender on Friday. I really just thought, okay, well, she went with the wounded to Jervis Street, it's not that far away. I wasn't really alerted to until I had read Molly Reynolds' story about what actually happened on that trip. So I was able to go back in and really find out what happened. So that's in her own handwriting there. And the surrender she meant, I think she meant the surrender of the GPO to the Flames, and that's where I think I got a bit confused. So they were in the GPO, and we know during the week the women, and I am concentrating mainly on the GPO women. We had the kitchens and the dining room, the munition factory, first aid station, dispatch office and cellars. The women and men slept on mattresses in the corridors, and they were working around the clock, especially the women providing the food, keeping the men well fed, which was really important, though it was never just sandwiches and bandages, it was always more. So there we have more depictions. The artists do a great job. Can't see any of the women there, but it does mention how they stood in for them. And this is a really authentic picture, but we don't have any pictures of the women, real pictures, so we have to rely on the artists, which is fantastic. We do have the accounts, and we have one of the women. There were smaller outposts all over the place, and I went across the Pond Street to GPO on Wednesday evening with a white flag and a stick with bullets flying around me. So they were out and in the battlefield, very dangerous. And they were they had to get supplies, and they went to the local hotel, the Metropole, and they borrowed mattresses and pillows to use for the women to use in their hospital. So I probably am taking up a lot of time, but the whole thing of my story was to actually find the names of these women who went on this journey, because there was 3 evacuations of women on the Friday, on the eve of the surrender from the GPO. At least that's what I firmly believe. So the first group went at noon, and they maybe were 40 to 50, and I think they went to Broadstone Station. They were intercepted, and I think these are a lot of the women that are here. So that group are up to 77 women, and thank goodness we've got their names, we know about them. And then we have the 3 women who went to Moore Street. We know we had Winifred Carney, Julia Grennan, and Elizabeth O'Farrell, and we're getting to know a lot about them. And hopefully when Moore Street is sensitively restored and built into historic and cultural, which I know is going to happen, everyone is going to sign the petition and write to the minister and support Colum in court if he decides to go to the Supreme Court, because that is a win-win situation. People want to come back and see our history and heritage, but I'm not here to talk about them in particular. So this was actually the highlight of our research, was naming these women. There's 12 of them. I don't think they got intercepted on the way. Now, Mary may prove me wrong, I think maybe they went to Jervis Street, and Molly Reynolds was taken in a week later to Richmond Barracks, but they got to Jervis Street and they got home. So
you have that, don't you? That actual.
Oh yeah, thanks. So yeah, I did. I have this armband here.
Yeah.
So this is my grandmother's armband, and it's very precious, and it has the blood of the volunteers on it. So we might. It's really. Pardon?
Take photographs after.
Oh yeah, sure. And you can hold it too. So I get goosebumps holding it, and I get very emotional sometimes when I go into the detail of the story, which I probably haven't got time to do, but it is coming. It might take me another 3 years, or someone might take it up. So these are, maybe we have some relatives of these women here. Do any of you know them?
They wouldn't be here because they were close to Richmond Barracks.
But some of the relatives here from the
We
association.
know the McGinty, that they all come to our events, and they live in Clontarf.
Great. So what I'm trying to do is to get the relatives and maybe be a bit like and get in there so that they can read the files and come back and put more pieces together of the story of the women evacuated. So, Noreen, do I have to?
Maybe 10 more.
Okay, great. 10 more minutes. Fantastic. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be really quick, and I can't do justice to it. It's a fantastic story. Really So Dublin's blazing on Friday night, and the big guns have moved in. Men and women from the outposts have come into the GPO to avoid the shelling. Civilians have been killed, and we know, of course, about the children and looting. The hospitals are all getting full. The nurses and St John ambulances are out there. Civilians are starting to help out even in the battlefield. So we have the Mater, we had Jervis Street, we had other Patrick Dunn's Hospital, St Alton's, and they all played a role, and a huge credit to all the medical staff who helped. So the roof was beginning to cave in on Friday, and we had people up on the roof. I just like to illustrate, and they were pierced when they were being told to come down. It just wasn't safe. These quotes are from the women's statements. The shelling was fierce, and the whole place shook, and I felt every minute would be our last. So this is when they were in the GPO. They thought they were going to die before they even got out. We're going to heaven together. So it was becoming, all the different positions were becoming unsafe and untenable, and it was eventually decided that some of the women should leave the buildings. So there we go. So Pierce, the women didn't want to leave. It brought tears to their eyes, and they were willing to share the fate of the men. I think that comes across very clearly. They were willing to share the fate of the men. They were told to leave. So he literally said, anyone who doesn't have nursing experience, you have to go. So this group went with Leslie Price, and I don't know how many, it varies. There could have been maybe up to 40 of them, because they'd come in from some of the outposts, and they went at noon. So Pierce shook their hand, and James Connolly was there as well to remind them what a wonderful contribution they had made. And I guess it was a very, very poignant time. So off they went at noon via Jervis Street, and then up to Broadstone, and they were intercepted. You can go into the statements, and I'm not going to talk about their story. I met Barry Lyons a couple of years ago, and we knew about the other group, and Barry drew me that map, and I kept it, and he was telling me about Williams Lane, and Marcus filmed me walking the route of, so this is sort of the route from the GPO that this other group did. This is all where the other outposts were. So many of the other girls had come in. So there were a lot of women in the GPO. Now this is my little diagram where all the garrisons are there, the 3 evacuations with the women. So the 3 women to Moore Street, the group at noon to Broadstone, and many of them have ended up in here. They have files and records. But this other group, which I think maybe 12 women, their story hasn't been really told because they didn't get intercepted, and there isn't a lot of information about them. So this again is another statement, and it just says that the number of girls that were picked up in that earlier group were about 50, but as I said, that does vary. So that was Pierce thanking them. So on Friday, a lot of us were sent home. There was too many coming along about, and the food was running short, so the men didn't want to share their food. We walked along the Broadstone map up to Fitzborough, and although the British held us up at the bars, they let us through, and we said we were going home to Haver Road. So that was one of the accounts, but they do vary, and they could have. So this is the other group, the other Elizabeth and Julia and Winifred went down Moor Lane into Moore Street, as we know, and you see the GPO in the background, and there we have the history. I would hope by now that everyone does know the history of Moore Street. Last Council of War, the Field Hospital in number 10, Elizabeth Farrell surrender. It's just too much to talk about. So the volunteers tunnelled from house to house, starting with number 10, which is a huge significant importance, and there are some bullet holes that they found around the 50th. And then, of course, we had the O'Reilly out, who lay dying on Moore Street. So he was gunned down by a machine gun, and these were accounts I read again of that. And there was another woman in Moore Street as well, and that was Linda Kearns. Linda Kearns is very interesting, and she's come to great prominence, I think, because she was very active in the Civil War. But she had actually set up a makeshift hospital, and she was looking after both sides. And then she actually went looking for the O'Reilly, and that's her little account there where she said, I walked around the streets, see if I could give assistance to any old volunteers. I was carrying a stretcher to rescue the body, and we got through the barricades of Parnell Street and Moore Street with a British officer who was standing beside the body. She's talking about the O'Reilly. Said there was no use removing his, as he was quite dead, so we had to return without achieving our objective. I always regretted that I was not able to do something for that. So she was very, very. And then that's Winifred's account of Elizabeth was chosen to be in Moore Street and go out with the surrender note. So one of the women, 12 women, was Margaret Margaret Kennedy is up there, and we went to Jervis Street with the wounded. She's in question. So they had to answer really cruel where they'd been. And she's talking about a lot of the women weren't in uniform. And then he said, were you liable to be arrested? And she said, yes, liable to be shot with the wounded. So they were, they knew the risk they were taking. So Pierce appointed, this is the group, he appointed Father Flanagan and Desmond Fitzgerald, led these group of 12 women. And I'm going to stop here now, and I haven't really got to the good bit, but it's quite, there was a priest, there was two medical students, and John Doyle, the chief medical officer. George Manley was from Cork, and he was a prisoner they were keeping. He had actually fulfilled his duties under his profession and assisted James Connolly, and he went with the wounded, and he was in his uniform, his British uniform, so that turned out very good to secure a safe passage for them when they did arrive at Williams Lane, and they managed to get through it and down to Jervis Street. And they had armed volunteers, and some of the armed volunteers who were boring out of the GPO were our Lord Mayor's great uncles, the 5 Ring brothers, were tunnelling and boring to help the women evacuate the burning building, and there was the stretcher cases and other casualties. So yeah, I've run out of time. Williams Lane is incredibly important. That's the Coliseum where they ended up on the floor saying acts of contrition. That's what it looked like afterwards. They recounted all. They did get to Williams Lane eventually, and they couldn't help but think they'd be burned alive like trapped rats. So there they are recounting that. And this is just some of the damage. So we can just imagine what it was like for them. And I'm going to wrap it up by just, that's the 3 men doctors after it. And there's some of the wounded down at Jervis Street Hospital. They did get to Jervis Street Hospital, but not without down on their knees at Williams Lane with the priest, receiving absolution, ready to die for the country. So, thank you.